Many people believe that failure is inevitable. Mankind failure has frequently created catastrophes that devastate the environment and taken away many lives. The following 10 worst man-made disasters of all time are difficult to determine with so many blunders made by human. However, excluding the loss of life resulting from war, terrorism or transportation disaster, this list includes the incidents that have had the most effect on people and the environment. Here's the complete 10 worst man-made disasters recorded in history. Disaster number 1. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill. On the 20th of April 2010, while drilling at the Macondo prospect, an uncontrollable blowout caused an explosion on the rig that killed 11 crewmen and ignited a fireball visible from 40 miles away. The fire was inextinguishable, and 2 days later, on the 22nd of April, the Horizon sank, leaving the well gushing at the seabed and causing the largest oil spill in U.S. waters. At the time of the explosion, there were 126 crew on board. 7 were employees of British Petroleum, 79 of Transocean. There were also employees of various other companies involved in the operation of the rig, including Anadarko, Halliburton and M.I. Swaco. 11 workers were presumed killed in the initial explosion. The rig was evacuated, with injured workers airlifted to medical facilities. After approximately 36 hours, Deepwater Horizon sank on the 22nd of April 2010. The remains of the rig were located resting on the seafloor approximately 5,000 feet deep at that location, and about 1,300 feet northwest of the well. The resultant oil spill continued until the 15th of July, when it was closed by a cap. Relief wells were used to permanently seal the well, which was declared effectively dead on the 19th of September 2010. Disaster number 2. Castle Bravo. Castle Bravo was the first in a series of high-yield thermonuclear weapon design tests conducted by the United States at Bikini Atoll of Marshall Islands. As part of Operation Castle, detonated on the 1st of March 1954, the device was the most powerful nuclear device detonated by the United States, and its first lithium deuteride-fueled thermonuclear weapon. Castle Bravo's yield was 15 megatons of TNT, 2.5 times more than predicted, which led to the unexpected radioactive contamination of areas to the east of Bikini Atoll. Fallout from the detonation fell on residents of Rongelap and Utrik atolls and spread around the world. The islanders were not evacuated until 3 days later and suffered radiation sickness. 23 crew members of the Japanese fishing vessel Daigo Fukuryu Maru were also contaminated by fallout, experiencing acute radiation syndrome. The blast incited international reaction over atmospheric thermonuclear testing. Disaster number 3. The Door to Hell. The Darvaza gas crater, known locally as the Door to Hell, or Gates of Hell, is a natural gas field in Derwiz of Turkmenistan that collapsed into an underground cavern, becoming a natural gas crater. According to Turkmen geologist Anatoly Bushmakin, the site was identified by Soviet engineers in 1971. It was originally thought to be a substantial oil field site. The engineers set up a drilling rig and operations to assess the quantity of oil available at the site. Soon after, the preliminary survey found a natural gas pocket. The ground beneath the drilling rig and camp collapsed into a wide crater and was buried. Geologists set it on fire to prevent the spread of methane gas, and it has been burning continuously since then. The diameter of the crater is 69 meters, and its depth is 30 meters. Expecting dangerous releases of poisonous gases from the cavern into nearby towns, the engineers thought it best to burn the gas off. It was estimated that the gas would burn out within a few weeks, but it has instead continued to burn for more than 4 decades. The years of the crater's history are uncertain. Local geologists say the collapse into a crater happened in the 1960s, and the gases weren't set on fire until the 1980s. There are, however, no records available for any version of the events. Disaster number 4. The Sidoarjo mud volcano. The Sidoarjo mudflow, or Lapindo mud, is the result of an erupting mud volcano in the Sidoarjo of Indonesia that has been in eruption since May 2006. It is the biggest mud volcano in the world. Responsibility for it was credited to the blowout of a natural gas well drilled by a company called Lapindo Brantas, although some scientists and company officials contend it was caused by a distant earthquake. There was controversy as to what triggered the eruption and whether the event was a natural disaster or not. According to Lapindo Brantas, it was the 2006 Yogyakarta earthquake that triggered the mudflow eruption, and not their drilling activities. 2 days before the mud eruption, an earthquake of moment magnitude 6.3 hit the south coast of central Java and Yogyakarta province, killing 6,234 people and leaving 1.5 million homeless. At a hearing before the parliamentary members, senior executives of Leopoldo Brandes argued that the earthquake was so powerful that it had reactivated previously inactive faults and also creating deep underground fractures, allowing the mud to breach the surface, and that their company presence was coincidental, which should exempt them from paying compensation damage to the victims. If the cause of the incident is determined to be natural, then the government of Indonesia has the responsibility to cover the damage instead. This argument was also recurrently echoed by Barzil Bakri, the Indonesian Minister of Welfare at that time, whose family firm controls the operator company Leopoldo Brandes. Disaster number 5. The Minamata disease. Minamata disease is a neurological syndrome caused by severe mercury poisoning. Symptoms include ataxia, numbness in the hands and feet, general muscle weakness, loss of peripheral vision, and damage to hearing and speech. In extreme cases, insanity, paralysis, coma, and death follow within weeks of the onset of symptoms. A congenital form of the disease can also affect fetuses in the womb. Minamata disease was first discovered in Minamata City in Kumamoto Prefecture of Japan in 1956. It was caused by the release of methylmercury in the industrial wastewater from the Chiso Corporation's chemical factory, which continued from 1932 to 1968. This highly toxic chemical bioaccumulated in shellfish and fish in Minamata Bay and the Sea of Shiranui, which when eaten by the local populace resulted in mercury poisoning. While cat, dog, pig and human deaths continued for 36 years, the government and company did little to prevent the pollution. The animal effects were severe enough in cats that they came to be named as having dancing cat fever. As of March 2001, 2,265 victims had been officially recognized as having Minamata disease, which 1,784 of whom had died and over 10,000 had received financial compensation from Chiso. By 2004, Chiso Corporation had paid $86 million in compensation, and in the same year was ordered to clean up its contamination. On the 29th of March 2010, a settlement was reached to compensate as yet uncertified victims. Before we continue to the next disaster, please take time to hit the like and subscribe button below to help us grow. One click from you means a lot to us. Disaster number 6. The Exxon Valdez oil spill. The Exxon Valdez oil spill occurred in Prince William Sound of Alaska in the 24th of March 1989. An oil tanker called Exxon Valdez, owned by Exxon Shipping Company bound for Long Beach, California, struck Prince William Sound Supply Reef and spilled 10.8 million U.S. gallons of crude oil over the next few days. It is considered to be one of the most devastating human-caused environmental disasters. The Valdez spill is the second largest in U.S. waters, after the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill in terms of volume released. Prince William Sound's remote location that was accessible only by helicopter, plane, or boat, made government and industry response efforts difficult and severely taxed existing plans for a response. The region is a habitat for salmon, sea otters, seals and seabirds. The oil originally extracted at the Prudhoe Bay oil field eventually covered 1,300 miles of coastline and 11,000 square miles of ocean, according to official reports. The ship was carrying approximately 54 million U.S. gallons of oil, of which about 10.8 million U.S. gallons were spilled into the Prince William Sound. A figure of 11 million U.S. gallons was a commonly accepted estimate of the spill's volume and has been used by the state of Alaska's Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and environmental groups such as Greenpeace and the Sierra Club. Disaster number 7. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is a gyre of marine debris particles in the central North Pacific Ocean discovered between 1985 and 1988. The patch extends over an indeterminate area of widely varying range depending on the degree of plastic concentration used to define the affected area. The patch is characterized by exceptionally high relative concentrations of pelagic plastics, chemical sludge and other debris that have been trapped by the currents of the North Pacific Gyre. Its low density prevents detection by satellite photography, or even by casual boaters or divers in the area. It consists primarily of a small increase in microscopic particles in the upper water column. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch was described in a 1988 paper published by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration of the United States. The description was based on results obtained by several Alaska-based researchers between 1985 and 1988 that measured neustonic plastic in the North Pacific Ocean. Researchers found high concentrations of marine debris accumulating in regions governed by ocean currents. Extrapolating from findings in the Sea of Japan, the researchers hypothesized that similar conditions would occur in other parts of the Pacific where prevailing currents were favorable to the creation of relatively stable waters. They specifically indicated the North Pacific Gyre. Disaster number 8. The Jilin chemical explosion. The Jilin chemical plant explosions were a series of explosions, which occurred on the 13th of November 2005 in the number 101 petrochemical plant in Jilin City of China over the period of an hour. The explosions killed 6, injured dozens, and caused the evacuation of tens of thousands of residents. The blast created an 80 kilometers long toxic slick in the Songhua River, a tributary of the Amur. The slick, predominantly made up of benzene and nitrobenzene, passed through the Amur River over subsequent weeks. The cause of the blast was initially determined 2 days after the blast. The accident site is a nitration unit for aniline equipment. T-102 tower jammed up and was not handled properly, hence the blast. The blast was so powerful that they shattered windows at least 100 to 200 meters away. At least 70 people were injured and 6 were killed. The fires were finally put out early in the morning of November 14th. Over 10,000 people were evacuated from the area, including local residents and students at the North Campus of Biwa University and Jilin Institute of Chemical Technology, for fear of further explosions and contamination with harmful chemicals. The CNPC, which owns the company in charge of the factory Jilin Petrochemical Corporation, has asked senior officials to investigate the cause of the incidents. The explosions are not thought to be related to terrorism, and the company told a press conference that they had occurred as a result of a chemical blockage that had gone unfixed. Disaster number 9. The Bayamari water cyanide contamination. On the night of the 30th of January 2000, a dam holding contaminated waters burst and 100,000 cubic meters of cyanide-contaminated water containing an estimated 100 tons of cyanide spilled over some farmland and then into the Sumaze River. After the spill, the Sumaze had cyanide concentrations of over 700 times the permitted levels. The Sumaze flows into the Tisza, Hungary's second-largest river, which then flows into the Danube. The spill contaminated the drinking supplies of over 2.5 million Hungarians. In addition to cyanide, heavy metals were also washed into the river and had a long-lasting negative impact on the environment. Wildlife was particularly affected on the Tisza. On a stretch, virtually all living things were killed, and further south in the Serbian section, 80% of the aquatic life was killed. 200 tons of it was the fish in these rivers. Large quantities of fish died due to the toxicity of cyanide in the waters of the rivers, affecting 62 species of fish, which 20 of them are protected species. The Romanian government claimed that the fish had died of cold, and they were not at fault. In Hungary, volunteers participated in removing the dead fish to prevent the disaster from spreading across the food chain, as other animals such as foxes, otters, and ospreys have died after eating the contaminated fish. Disaster number 10. The Chernobyl disaster. Chernobyl is a city in the restricted Chernobyl exclusion zone situated in Ivankiv Raion of northern Kyiv Oblast of Ukraine, near the border with Belarus. The city was the administrative center of Chernobyl Raion from 1923 until it was disestablished in 1988 after the catastrophic nuclear accident occurred on the 26th of April 1986. The city currently has 704 inhabitants. During a late-night safety test which simulated power failure, and in which safety systems were deliberately turned off, a combination of inherent reactor design flaws, together with the reactor operators arranging the core in a manner contrary to the checklist for the test, eventually resulted in uncontrolled reaction conditions that flashed water into steam, generating a destructive steam explosion and a subsequent open-air graphite of fire. This fire produced considerable updrafts for about 9 days. That lofted plumes of fission products into the atmosphere, with the estimated radioactive inventory that was released during this very hot fire phase, approximately equal in magnitude to the airborne fission products released in the initial destructive explosion. Practically all of this radioactive material would then go on to fall out, precipitate onto much of the surface of the western USSR and Europe. 400 times more radioactive material was released from the Chernobyl than by the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. The disaster released 1/100th to 1/1000th of the total amount of radioactivity released by nuclear weapons testing during the 1950s and 1960s. Approximately 100,000 kilometers of land was significantly contaminated with the fallout, with the worst hit regions being in Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. Slighter levels of contamination were detected over all of Europe except for the Iberian Peninsula. If you think this video is valuable and want to watch our other videos, don't forget to click that subscribe button because we have a lot of informative videos for you in the future. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed it.